History often teaches us that every life lost in World War II was documented, counted, and filed away into the archives of wartime bureaucracy. But what happens when a life is erased so completely that not even the system meant to control it can explain how it disappeared? This story pulls you into the center of hidden history, revealing one of the most unsettling wartime secrets buried inside the walls of a Nazi camp. You are about to witness a documented paradox so disturbing that it challenges everything we assume about surveillance, control, and the human will to survive. Some say history is written by those who live to tell it, but this case forces us to confront a darker possibility, that not every truth was meant to be found. As intelligence files contradict themselves and classified documents reveal gaps where certainty should exist, you will uncover a disappearance that has baffled historians for decades. And as you step deeper into this mystery, remember that this channel has explored many forgotten heroes and unexplained war stories, yet none as chilling as this one. Before we begin, support this investigation by subscribing, liking, and sharing, because stories like this survive only when we refuse to let them fade. Open your mind. Today, history has something important to reveal to you. A stark frame opens over barbed wire sinking into winter fog as distant boots imprint the mud, echoing the cold machinery of World War II. The camera glides forward with documentary stillness, revealing an empty space where a man should have stood, drawing viewers instantly into hidden history shaped by loss. With a slow, atmospheric build-up, the narrator's voice breaks the silence. In 1943, a prisoner disappeared from a Nazi camp, without digging a tunnel, without bribing a guard, without leaving a single trace. The scene transitions like an intelligence file unfolding, revealing fragments of archives stamped with inconsistencies that should not exist. Each faded document amplifies the emotional tension of wartime secrets resurfacing from the shadows. Cinematic lighting cuts sharply across roll call sheets where one number has vanished, raising questions about a disappearance that challenges the rigid structure of Nazi occupation. This investigative tone deepens as classified documents flicker on screen, their crossed-out lines hinting at something deliberately concealed. The viewer senses rising tension as the story resists simple interpretation, positioning this prisoner among forgotten heroes whose stories were almost erased. The narration tightens its focus, guiding the audience into war stories that defy explanation, as if history itself is withholding the truth. Even in the controlled environment of a concentration camp, something happened that should have been impossible. The camera shifts to reconstructed AI scenes of guards scanning the yard, offering visual cues for thumbnails and mid-video imagery while maintaining full historical respect. A cold wind sweeps across the camp in the background, and the narrator underscores the paradox. The prisoner did not escape in the traditional sense, and no record outlines how he vanished. Atmospheric tension grows as viewers recall other cases on this channel involving secret missions and wartime mysteries, creating a connected universe of hidden events. Here, the contradiction is sharper, more unsettling, as though reality fractured for a single moment. The emotional depth intensifies with each frame, as archival photographs fade in, grainy, fractured, and incomplete. The investigative narration continues exposing gaps in intelligence files that should match, but do not. These inconsistencies become a visual metaphor for the prisoner's disappearance. Sharp, undeniable absences within systems built for absolute control. In the context of World War II, where documentation was a weapon of authority, such a void feels almost like a silent warning. This war story unfolds not with explosions, but with erasures. Viewers sense the weight of the unknown pressing against the borders of documented history. Slow transitions reveal the camp's environment from above. Towers, fences, patrol routes, all reinforcing how impossible escape should have been. Yet the deeper the narrator dives into wartime archives, the more the case refuses to align with logic. The emotional buildup continues as the camera retraces the prisoner's last known path, guided by survivor testimonies that contradict nothing, yet explain nothing. This moment becomes a stage where uncertainty is the antagonist. The scene anchors itself in the harsh reality of WW2 while hinting at a truth concealed beneath layers of classified documentation. The narrator's tone softens, reflecting on stories explored in previous videos. Moments where resistance fighters, prisoners, and civilians left behind traces that contradicted official narratives. Viewers are subtly reminded that history often hides what threatens its structure. Standing at the intersection of fear and silence, this disappearance challenges everything assumed about Nazi occupation's rigidity. Visual cues, frosted fences, dim searchlights, abandoned barracks, guide how thumbnails and AI reconstructions may represent this moment. The emotional immersion deepens, urging the audience to lean further into the mystery. The opening segment closes with rising tension as the narrator delivers the final hook. Today we uncover how this impossible disappearance became one of the most baffling events ever reported inside a Nazi camp. The camera pulls upward as the fog swallows the landscape, echoing the sensation of a life erased. This transition sets the tone for a full investigation, grounded in archives, testimonies, and wartime secrets. Viewers feel the pull of a truth buried beneath history's surface, and with that final note, the investigation begins. The year 1943 stands at the crossroads of World War II, a year when nations cracked under the pressure of endless conflict and the world seemed suspended between collapse and resurgence. Under Nazi occupation, Europe was carved into zones of fear, fragmentation, and control, each region storing its own hidden history within scattered archives. Inside the concentration camps, however, the struggle took on a different shape, one measured not in battles or secret missions, but in breadth, endurance, and the erasure of identity. Prisoners lived in forced silence, navigating unchecked brutality as their lives dissolved into classified documents filed without meaning. Within this chaos, one disappearance would echo with chilling precision. Conditions inside the camps deteriorated daily as overcrowding, starvation, and disease consumed every corner of existence. Prisoners faced labor that broke the body, surveillance that crushed the mind, and psychological collapse that killed the spirit long before death arrived. Guards enforced rules with rigid certainty, shaping an atmosphere where even hope felt dangerous. In such an environment, how could a man possibly vanish without triggering the mechanisms designed to prevent escape? The question lingers, haunting the narrative like cold breath on a winter morning. Archival footage and intelligence files reinforce the brutal structure of these camps, rows of barracks stretching into the horizon, watchtowers scanning endlessly, and patrol routes drawn with terrifying efficiency. Each of these details reinforces the impossibility of disappearance, heightening the tension that drives this investigation. It is here, in this meticulously controlled world, that contradictions begin to surface. The disappearance becomes more than an anomaly. It becomes a direct challenge to the infallibility the regime claimed to possess. Cinematic transitions carry viewers through declassified documents that showcase the harsh reality of daily routine. Dawn roll calls marked the beginning of relentless labor, while nights brought only brief rest from exhaustion. The sharp cold and constant hunger served as tools of domination, leaving prisoners with little strength to resist or question. These details also guide visual reconstructions. AI scenes of skeletal figures lining up in the snow, guards pacing along the perimeter, shadows stretching under searchlights. This is where real war stories unfolded far from the battlefield. The broader wartime environment shaped the instability that allowed cracks to form within the system. Germany faced increasing pressure on multiple fronts, forcing command structures to stretch thinner than intended. This strain often resulted in administrative flaws, errors in communication, and unexpected vulnerabilities. Yet even with these cracks, the system remained overwhelmingly oppressive. Could such instability have created the conditions for an unexplained disappearance? Or did the chaos of the era simply bury the truth beneath layers of wartime secrets? Subtle references to other videos remind viewers that this was not the only moment in World War II when individuals vanished inside bureaucratic shadows. Across different regions, similar inconsistencies appear in the archives, silent testimonies to events that were never meant to be remembered. The interconnected universe of hidden history grows with each revelation, allowing the audience to understand how often the war blurred truth and record. And yet, this case stands apart in its eerie completeness. The historical context closes with a chilling understanding. The disappearance of one man inside a camp where every life was monitored should not have been possible, and yet it happened. The narrator concludes softly but gravely. It was within this world of darkness that one man's disappearance would defy logic and ignite fear on both sides of the fence. The stage is now set for the next step in this unprecedented investigation. He was not a legend nor a soldier on a secret mission, but an ordinary man swept into the violent machinery of World War II, where countless forgotten heroes vanished into archives and numbers. His identity survives only through fragmented documents scattered across wartime records, each revealing little more than a name, a date, and a classification under Nazi occupation. Before imprisonment, he lived a simple life shaped by routine and work, unaware that the war would reshape his fate. Resistance fighters, civilians, and workers alike were pulled into the system without warning, leaving behind stories that rarely survived. His story is one of those buried within hidden history. As survivor testimonies later revealed, he was quiet, observant, attentive, someone who learned quickly how to navigate the brutal demands of camp life. In environments ruled by violence, such traits often meant the difference between life and death, survival and collapse. He avoided conflict, listened more than he spoke, and adapted to the unpredictable currents of fear that shaped each day. These habits would later fuel theories about how he vanished without a trace. Visual reconstructions imagine him among rows of prisoners, expression muted, body weakened, yet eyes alive with awareness. Intelligence files list him without emphasis, presenting him as one among thousands. Yet this ordinariness is precisely what intensifies the mystery. Why would a man with no recorded infractions, no escape attempts, and no known connections simply disappear? His presence within classified documents is sparse, almost as though history struggled to remember him at all. And yet, the few details that remain suggest a life far more complex than the records imply. The topic closes with the lingering thought. Nothing suggested he was capable of something extraordinary until the day everything changed. Life inside the camp unfolded under conditions that stripped men of identity, reducing them to mere entries in Nazi administrative files. Days began before dawn with freezing winds piercing through thin uniforms, a reminder of the relentless hardship that defined existence under wartime secrets. Work details stretched for hours, forcing prisoners into manual labor that exceeded human limits, while guards enforced discipline with calculated cruelty. Surveillance was omnipresent, reducing every movement to a risk. As survivors later reflected, survival was not measured in days but in breaths. The emotional toll intensified as disease spread rapidly, weakening bodies already ravaged by starvation and exhaustion under World War II's harshest conditions. Moral despair set in as prisoners confronted the constant sight of death, knowing they were trapped within a system designed to consume them. Hidden history reveals that even those who endured physically often struggled to maintain their sense of self. Yet the routine also exposed patterns in guard behavior, schedules, and vulnerabilities, details the prisoner quietly observed. These small observations became crucial to his adaptation, allowing him to endure where many could not. AI reconstructed scenes of the camp show endless lines of prisoners marching under watchtowers, their figures fading into snow as guards shout commands. The environment itself becomes a character in the story, oppressive, unforgiving, trapping every life within its barbed boundaries. In this world of fear and silence, resilience became an act of resistance, even when unspoken. And so the topic concludes by showing how the prisoner endured, not through strength, but through observation, patience, and an inner stillness that hid deeper layers of survival. His adaptation would later become a focal point in understanding his disappearance. As the months passed, the atmosphere within the camp shifted into something sharper, heavier, shaped by the broader tensions of World War II and the failing confidence of Nazi occupation. Supplies grew thinner, guards more irritable, and punishments increasingly unpredictable, creating a climate where fear became the air everyone breathed. Rumors circulated among the prisoners, whispers of secret missions, of resistance fighters captured elsewhere, of unexplained transfers, all adding to the unease brewing within the barracks. Tension grew not from dramatic events, but from tiny deviations in the daily routine, subtle enough to unsettle even the most resilient. Guards exhibited signs of pressure as internal conflicts within the German War Command filtered down into the camp structure. The psychological weight on prisoners intensified as they sensed danger not from actions, but from shifting intentions. Visual directions suggest showing silhouettes of guards pacing at night, their lanterns cutting across the camp yard like blades of light. Every prisoner felt the change, though few understood its cause. Such rising tension becomes essential for building the emotional and narrative arc of the story. This mounting instability created an environment ripe for anomalies, moments when wartime secrets and administrative flaws collided. By the time the prisoner vanished, the atmosphere had already reached a boiling point. These tensions form the backdrop to everything that follows, preparing the viewer for an event that would defy explanation and fracture the illusion of total control. The day before the disappearance unfolded with a strange stillness, the kind that unsettles even the most hardened survivors of Nazi occupation. Witnesses later recalled sensing a shift around the prisoner, his silence deeper than usual, his movements slower, his gaze distant. What had he seen? What had he realized? The question remains one of the most haunting in this case, echoing across archives and testimonies. Guards maintained their routine, but small irregularities caught the attention of those attuned to the camp's rhythm. Delayed orders, tense exchanges, unusual patrol movements. The prisoner avoided eye contact, choosing isolation over conversation, sparking quiet concern among those who noticed. AI reconstructed imagery for this segment might show the prisoner sitting alone in the barracks, lit only by a sliver of fading daylight. Survivors who later spoke of this moment described a feeling difficult to articulate, as if something unseen was unfolding beneath the surface, a disturbance in the rigid order that governed their lives. The narrator slows the tempo here, enhancing the atmospheric build-up essential to wartime storytelling. The documentary tone softens into introspection, exploring possible interpretations without departing from historical accuracy. And finally, the segment concludes with the heavy truth carried by those who lived through it. But no one imagined it was the last time they would ever see him. The morning of the disappearance begins under a cold dawn that spreads a pale light across the compound, revealing the rigid order of Nazi occupation as prisoners line up in silence. Frost coats the ground, and the atmosphere feels unnaturally still, shaped by the weight of World War II tension lingering in the air. As guards step forward to conduct roll call, the camp watches with the same dread experienced every morning, bracing for punishment or command. But on this day, something is different. One space in the line stands empty, a small void that ripples through the entire formation. A whisper travels through the ranks before anyone dares to breathe. The guard in charge scans the row again, disbelief sharpening his expression as he calls the number once more. But no voice answers, no figure steps forward, nothing changes. A single missing prisoner triggers a moment that feels frozen in time, a fracture in the rigid routine that governed every day. Suddenly whistles erupt, dogs are released, and chaos floods the yard as guards rush to contain an event that should not be possible. Searchlights sweep across barbed wire, boots drum against the frozen ground, and confusion spreads among prisoners who understand the danger such an anomaly brings. The intensity rises with each moment, creating imagery perfect for mid-video dramatization. Dogs pulling at leashes, guards shouting orders, prisoners trembling under uncertainty. Panic escalates because the system itself has been challenged. And within this kind of wartime secrets, challenges were not tolerated. When the dust settles, the impossible fact remains: the prisoner is gone. And as the narrator states, echoing through the tension, he was gone. As if erased from existence, the disappearance shatters the fragile balance of power inside the camp, sending fear rippling not only through the prisoners, but also through the guards whose authority appears suddenly compromised. The camp plunges into turmoil as sirens blare and search teams form, racing through every barrack, every workshed, every trench in an attempt to locate the missing man. Prisoners are rounded up for interrogation, their faces reflecting terror as they confront the unpredictable wrath of Nazi occupation. Guards storm through the rows, barking questions and striking anyone too slow to respond, their anger fueled by the unsettling realization that something has slipped beyond their control. Even within the structure of WW2, where violence was normalized, this level of unpredictability felt dangerous. Intelligence files later revealed the extent of the panic as officers documented the event with urgency, noting the failure of surveillance and the absence of clues. Visual reconstructions might show guards turning over straw bedding, ripping through personal rags, inspecting fingerprints on doors and windows, but nothing leading to the vanished prisoner. Such scenes create powerful thumbnail moments: soldiers searching the perimeter, prisoners kneeling with hands behind their heads, dogs sniffing through debris. For the inmates, fear grows as they contemplate the consequences of another man's disappearance: punishments, reduced rations, sudden executions. For the guards, fear emerges from a different source: accountability. A missing prisoner represents a breach in discipline, one that will trigger scrutiny from higher command, and so the tension deepens on both sides of the fence, culminating in the narrator's solemn conclusion. The guards faced an impossible truth: a prisoner had disappeared without leaving a footprint. Higher-ranking officers arrived swiftly, their presence shifting the atmosphere from chaos to cold precision as they launch an official internal inquiry demanded by wartime protocol. German command structures under World War II relied heavily on documentation, making any unexplained event a direct threat to their sense of order. Intelligence reports begin compiling timelines, cross-checking guard duties, analyzing logs, and assessing where the system might have failed. Yet each classified document reveals the same chilling contradiction. Nothing in the records explains how the prisoner left his barrack, avoided patrol routes, and crossed the yard unseen. Visual directions for this segment include maps of patrol lines, diagrams of fences, and recreated scenes of officers inspecting the perimeter with lanterns cutting through fog. The investigative tone intensifies as officers interrogate guards, searching for inconsistencies that might expose negligence or betrayal. But testimonies remain uniform, every guard insisting they followed regulations, leaving investigators circling the same void. As the inquiry deepens, officers broaden their search to possible administrative errors, transport misregistrations, or unauthorized transfers, yet none of these explanations match the facts. The archives begin to reflect the growing unease inside the camp. A meticulously controlled system encountering an anomaly impossible to categorize. The tension rises with each failed hypothesis, revealing how fragile even the most oppressive structures can be when confronted with uncertainty. And so the topic ends with a question that echoes through the war stories explored across this channel. How does a man escape from hell without escape? Decades after World War II ended, survivors began sharing memories of that eerie morning, offering fragments of hidden history that had remained silent for years. Their testimonies, gathered from archives and personal accounts, paint a mosaic of confusion, fear, and disbelief as they recalled the moment they realized a prisoner had vanished under Nazi occupation. Some believed he had escaped during a brief moment of chaos, imagining him slipping through shadows beyond the reach of searchlights. Others whispered that he might have collapsed during the night and been removed secretly, his absence disguised through classified documents that erased inconvenient truths. But through all these recollections, one question rises like smoke from the ruins. How could an event so impossible unfold in a place designed to eliminate mystery? Visual scenes reconstruct prisoners huddled together, voices low, exchanging theories while trying to avoid guard attention. Their words reveal a community trying to make sense of something that defied the logic of the camp's rigid surveillance system. Fear lingered in every retelling, not fear of the missing man, but fear of what his disappearance implied about their own fragile safety. The event, rather than inspiring hope, deepened the dread that already dominated their lives. In the final reflection, the narrator reminds the audience that even those closest to the moment could not escape its weight. All testimonies share a single haunting certainty: the disappearance did not inspire hope. It deepened dread. As investigators sifted through wartime secrets, several theories emerged, each grounded in historically documented patterns found throughout World War II archives. The first possibility was an administrative mishap, a not uncommon occurrence when overcrowded camps mishandled transport lists or roll call records, occasionally causing prisoners to appear missing on paper while physically present elsewhere. Another theory pointed to a secret execution, an unrecorded killing carried out without witnesses, the body removed before dawn and the evidence buried beneath classified documents to avoid punitive scrutiny from higher command. A third scenario suggested the prisoner may have used a moment of confusion or guard distraction to attempt an escape, a rare but not impossible act that had occurred in other war stories explored on this channel. A fourth explanation involved identity confusion, common in camps where prisoners exchanged clothing, numbers, or barrack spaces in desperate attempts to survive, often leading to misidentified individuals during early morning counts. Visual suggestions for this segment include split-screen theories, archival diagrams, and AI reconstructions illustrating each possible scenario without crossing into fiction. Yet none of these theories fully fit the documented facts, and every hypothesis leaves unanswered questions scattered like fragments across the archives. As each idea collapses under scrutiny, the mystery grows sharper, revealing how even the most rigid systems can hold shadows within them. And so, the segment concludes with a stark realization. Despite all known explanations, none fully accounts for the prisoner's disappearance. Historians examining wartime archives and intelligence files increasingly point toward one explanation as the most plausible, though still unsettling: a covert execution followed by deliberate removal of records. This method, documented in several camps during 1943, allowed Nazi officers to eliminate prisoners without formal acknowledgement, bypassing regulations that required paperwork for every death. Such erasures were part of larger bureaucratic strategies to conceal internal failures, unauthorized actions, or the deaths of individuals considered politically inconvenient. Classified documents reveal patterns in these unrecorded executions, gaps in ledgers, overwritten numbers, and roll call discrepancies identical to those found in this case. Visual reconstruction for this topic might show ledger pages being altered, names crossed out with trembling ink, and files closing with the weight of concealed truth. The prisoner's disappearance fits too closely into these patterns to ignore, drawing historians toward a grim but historically consistent conclusion. While no single document confirms it, the convergence of evidence forms a chilling mosaic mirroring other war stories explored in this channel's investigations. And so the topic closes with the final heavy line that encapsulates the heart of this case. He did not vanish. He was silenced, and his memory nearly erased. The disappearance of a single prisoner inside a Nazi-controlled camp may seem small when compared to the vast destruction of World War II, but its historical significance reaches far beyond the event itself. It exposes the mechanisms of power, silence, and erasure that operated beneath the surface of the Nazi occupation. Wartime secrets were not always dramatic. Many were hidden in the quiet manipulation of documents, the rewriting of archives, and the elimination of individuals without a trace. This case reflects how bureaucratic systems could function as weapons, shaping memory and controlling truth. By examining this disappearance, we uncover patterns that appear in other hidden history explored across the channel, moments when a missing line in a document becomes as revealing as a battlefield report. Visual reconstructions of ledgers, ink scratches, and redacted pages help illustrate how historical truth was not just lost, but intentionally reshaped. The story becomes a mirror held up to the broader machinery of oppression, reminding viewers that every erased identity symbolized a deliberate act of control. In this sense, the vanished prisoner becomes a representation of countless forgotten heroes whose stories were nearly dissolved into administrative silence. A disappearance inside such a structured environment was more than an anomaly. It was a warning carved into the very mechanics of wartime governance. And this significance lingers long after the event itself fades from immediate memory. Behind every archive entry lies a life shaped by relationships, memories, hopes, and fears. And the disappearance of this prisoner invites deeper reflection on the human cost of World War II. While camps operated as engines of exploitation, the individuals trapped inside carried identities that stretched far beyond the numbers assigned to them. Families left behind endured years of uncertainty, never knowing whether their loved ones survived or perished under Nazi occupation. Visual elements for this segment might include faded letters, silhouettes of family members, and AI reconstructions of life before imprisonment. Small reminders that behind wartime secrets are human hearts. This story also highlights the collective suffering of millions who vanished without closure, transformed into missing entries in classified documents. Their absence shaped the emotional landscape of post-war Europe, leaving unresolved trauma that echoes across generations. In exploring the disappearance of one man, viewers connect with the immense scale of dehumanization imposed during WW2. This connection forms a bridge to other war stories on the channel, reinforcing how each individual narrative adds dimension to the broader historical truth. Ultimately, this disappearance becomes a symbolic echo of many others lost to silence. And it ends on a solemn note. In one man's vanishing, we hear the echoes of millions. Years after liberation, survivors began revisiting the memories they carried from the camp, stories shaped by fear, endurance, and unanswered questions. Many described the prisoner's disappearance as one of the most unsettling events of their captivity, not because it offered hope, but because it confronted them with the terrifying unknown. How could a man vanish in a place designed to eliminate every possibility of escape? That question haunted them long into old age, resurfacing whenever wartime secrets reappeared in documentaries or when newly opened archives exposed fragments of truth. Their reflections reveal how deeply this event was etched into their emotional memory, staying with them long after liberation. Some wondered whether they had missed a warning sign, a detail that could have explained what happened, while others believed the system simply swallowed him in silence. Visual cues for this topic might include interviews filmed decades after the war, hands trembling as survivors recall the weight of uncertainty they lived with. In their voices, the viewer hears not just recollection, but the moral burden of witnessing something that defied the logic of World War II's controlled brutality. And as the narrator summarizes their emotional truth, the final thought resonates painfully. To vanish was to be erased from memory, and memory was all they had left. Modern historians, archivists, and researchers continue to analyze the scattered traces of this disappearance, examining declassified documents and intelligence files that shed light on wartime secrets long buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. In the decades since World War II, new fragments have emerged from archives across Europe, offering clues but never delivering a definitive conclusion. These materials reveal patterns consistent with other hidden history explored throughout this channel, moments where Nazi occupation blurred truth through incomplete records and administrative manipulation. Scholars emphasize the difficulty of reconstructing a narrative built on erasures, yet each surviving detail adds dimension to the mystery. Visual representations might show historians sifting through handwritten reports, digital scans of faded ink, and AI-enhanced recreations of lost documents. The process reflects the complexity of revisiting events shaped by deliberate obfuscation. Despite the limitations, the modern perspective brings clarity to one point. The absence recorded in this case is not a simple anomaly, but part of a broader system of systematic concealment. The narrator concludes this topic with a reflective truth, reminding viewers why the investigation remains relevant. The truth of 1943 lies in fragments, but each fragment matters. As the investigation nears its end, the narrative shifts toward the responsibility we carry in preserving the memory of forgotten heroes and those erased by wartime systems. The narrator speaks with emotional depth, inviting viewers to recognize that hidden history survives only when it is willingly remembered, examined, and shared. Stories like this one illuminate the darker corners of World War II, revealing how secret missions, classified documents, and administrative silence shaped countless lives. Visual suggestions include archival footage dissolving into modern hands, turning fragile pages, symbolizing how memory passes from one generation to the next. Viewers are encouraged to reflect on the moral obligation of keeping these war stories alive, understanding that each remembrance stands against the forces that once sought to erase them. This call to action extends to the community that follows the channel, forming a network of individuals committed to preserving the truth. The narrator closes with a compelling invitation. If you believe stories like this must never be forgotten, support this work by liking the video, subscribing, and sharing it, so history continues to speak. The final segment returns to the emotional core of the narrative, guiding the viewer into a quiet space where reflection outweighs analysis. The narrator's tone softens as imagery of the camp fades into a stark white horizon, symbolizing the fragile line between memory and oblivion in WW2 archives. With a slow cinematic approach, the story acknowledges the power of remembering a man who was meant to disappear without a trace. His life, once reduced to a missing number, now stands rescued from silence through the act of retelling. Visual directions for closing imagery include barbed wire dissolving into light, a symbolic representation of reclaiming what was nearly lost. The narrative returns to its central truth. In 1943, they tried to erase a man, but they failed, because today, you remembered him. As the screen fades, the message echoes with lasting impact. As long as these wartime secrets are confronted, as long as viewers engage, share, and preserve history, no prisoner truly disappears. The closing line delivers final emotional resonance. As long as we tell their stories, no prisoner truly disappears. As this investigation closes, the disappearance of a single prisoner becomes more than a mystery. It becomes a reminder of how fragile truth can be during times of war. What will you do with this story now that you know it? Will you treat it as another chapter of World War II, or as a warning about the ease with which human lives can be erased when silence becomes a tool of power? The archives show us that history survives only when people choose to confront it, question it, and carry it forward. So let me ask you directly, what do you believe happened to this man? And what does his disappearance reveal about the countless victims whose stories never reached the light? Your answer matters, because every comment, every reflection, every question keeps these forgotten heroes alive within a world that once tried to eliminate them. If this story moved you, if it awakened something, or if it challenged what you thought you knew about wartime secrets, entonces te invito, suscríbete al canal para ver más videos, w2.shadowfiles. Together we preserve memory, confront silence, and keep truth alive. As one archival note written by a survivor once said, "If we do not speak, then those who vanish will vanish again." I have completed your entire script.